What's happening? Today we're going to go over a 12-1 crank trigger with a single pulse cam. A lot of you guys have made videos in the past about this, and I think that this is probably going to be the most in-depth way of explaining this. So a 12-1 means that there is 12 magnets in this wheel, and you can see there's a magnet, here's a piece of metal holding it. See it? Magnet, right? So there's magnets all the way around this, and there's one punched out. So this is a hyperactive wheel, and I've had this for a while with an Innovators West balancer, or Innovators West timing pointer, or crank trigger sensor holder. Holley has since released their own 12-1 with a holder. So anyway, I'm going to show you how to set this up. The first thing you want to do is roll the engine over to TDC. So kind of hard to focus, but right there is TDC. Okay. Then, here you go. I'm going to give the camera to Laura. Right here is our magnet, missing magnet right here. Right? So there's our missing magnet. If you look, we count 1, and then right down here is 2. So that's our second missing magnet. Okay. So you want to clamp it down there. Our second missing magnet. Now this is after. Everybody knows that the engine rotates this way, right? Goes that way. So while it's spinning clockwise, right? You want to be on the falling edge. Well, you could choose to be on the rising or falling, but I always set them up on the falling edge. So when you set this up, it's hub centric. So there's like a groove cut on the back of this, and then there's a groove, and then there's a male here on the balancer, so it's hub centric. It can still move a little bit because there's slop in the bolt holes, but it is hub centric, which means it doesn't have any run out. So run your bolts in for your mandrel, right? And we don't have to get crazy with tightening these up right now because I don't want the crank to turn over at all. So we'll leave it at TDC. There we go. All right, now get all 3 of our bolts tight. There we go. All right, now what we need to do is set up our sensor. So, there we go. Grab a 1/2-inch wrench. So this bracket allows the sensor to move, okay? So you see that, and then there's like multiple holes here, so like we can move these bolts all over the place. So this obviously already ran. So if you look, I've got the sensor on the falling edge of that magnet, okay? So what I mean by that with the falling edge is that as the crank is rotating, it's going to fall off of the sensor, okay? So the crank's going to rotate. This is the rising edge right here. So as the crank's rotating, this is rising edge, all right? Our TDC tooth number or magnet number is 2, right? Which indicates 60 degrees because there's 30 degrees per magnet, 12 magnets, 360 degrees. So we want to be on the falling edge. That's the way I set them up. So the sensor's on the falling edge, and we're just going to lock these down. Baby, come on. There we go. So we're going to lock these down. I'll torque these later. Well, I'm not going to torque them, but here. I'll put a wrench on them. There we go. You have to make that noise too. That's the only way you know it's tight, right? Right there. All right. So now you know that the sensor is in the close to the right location. Okay, now we have to adjust the depth of the sensor. So, get our handy dandy feeler gauge. If you don't have one of these, you probably shouldn't be racing. So, buy a feeler gauge. This is, I don't know, this one's from Starrett, I believe. But anything will do. Yeah, Starrett. Get 50 thousandths. So there's no 50 thousandths in here, right? So I'm going to grab 20 and 30. The target range, the target window here is 40 to 60 or 40 to 80 thousandths. I like to set them at 50. So stack 20 and 30, you got 50. Set it in here, and now start back your jam nut up a little bit. There you go. So now there we go. We got 50 thousandths. Okay. Don't force it. There's no point in forcing it. So I'll back it off a little bit. Hold the sensor in place. Snug that up, right? Here we go. Now, I use a handy dandy Earl's aluminum adjustable. The reason I use aluminum one is because you don't need to torque the piss out of this thing. So, Right there, we're tight. We got a, you know, in the middle, we got a pretty tight 50 thousandths. We're good to go. So a couple things to point out about your crank trigger. So that's set. When we go into the software and we confirm static timing, we can do a timing offset if it doesn't match perfectly. I made another video on confirming static timing. Watch that. So something to point out. When you buy a crank trigger setup, you have to know the diameter of your balancer. You want this crank trigger to be larger than the diameter of the balancer, because if it's smaller than the diameter of the balancer, you can't get the sensor in deep enough, right? Because we're only talking about 50 thousandths. So if the diameter of this wheel is smaller than this, the edge of this sensor is going to rub the balancer, which is no bueno. So, or you won't be able to just get enough gap. So make sure that when you measure your balancer, you know how large the balancer is, or you know the part number of the balancer, and you can ask the guy you're going to buy it from. Hopefully it's not Alibaba or something. And then get a larger diameter wheel. So that's it for the crank trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt up the rest of the manual so we can turn the engine over. And then I'm going to show you how to set up the cam sync at the same time. Give me a minute, I'll be right back. All right, so this is an RCD gear drive. We took the RCD gear drive cover off, and then this bolt right here has got a magnet in it. So if you notice, it's different than all the rest of them, right? And then if you look at this cover, it's got a hole for our cam sensor, and then a cam sensor threads in here, comes through the backside, and picks up on that bolt, right? So what we need to do is put the engine at 195 before top dead center on the compression stroke. So what I'm going to do is I've rolled the engine over. I'm at like 100 and something degrees right now, right? But we need to find the compression stroke. So if you take your finger, shove it in the #1 spark plug hole, you'll feel it pushing off of the, you'll push your finger off. You'll hear air, or you'll feel air. And in this video, you'll hear air. So here, listen. It's trying to push my finger off, right? So we know we're on a compression stroke. So I'm gonna back up, do it again, right? So we'll go clockwise, shove your finger there, and trying to push my finger off of the hole as I'm coming towards TDC, all right? So what we need to do is we need to back up to 195 degrees before top dead center. So here's top dead center. Right now I'm at 60 before top dead center. And side note, since we're at 60, I'll show you this. If you look, remember our missing magnet was up here before. Now we're at 60 degrees before top dead center, and the missing magnet is right lined up with the sensor. So remember, 2 magnets, 30 degrees per magnet, 60 degrees total. So 60 degrees is our reference angle on 12 minus 1. So we're going to keep backing up to 195. So back up right there, keep going, and let's see, 160, 170, 80, 195, right there. So now take our little plate, right? Here's our plate. I can shimmy it in here, and it lands right there. And it's hard to see, but you can, if I rotate it, you can see in there. See that right there? There's our magnet, right? So right there's our magnet. So we want to be on the falling edge of that again, right? That's the way I like to set them up. So behind here, there's our magnet. Our sensor should sit like right here, right? So as this is rotating around, it passes us, right? It passes. So this is on its way towards TDC. It's going this direction, right? So the engine's running, it's going this direction at half engine speed. This is on cam. So 195 on the compression stroke, our sensor is going to line up right here at the tip of this thing. So what I'm going to do is slide this back in here, all right? All right, so like so, all right? We'll grab a bolt, slide it in here. There we go. So it don't fall off on us. And if you notice, I had this thing maxed out, this adjustment maxed out, right? So you see how this is, see what this is doing with this adjustment? It's moving this, right? So we want to be right on the falling edge. There's a plus or minus 30-degree window with this. So it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I mean, if you're doing it, you might as well just do it right. You know what I mean? So throw a couple bolts in here. And then this is, a lot of you guys don't have this RCD thing, but the reality of it is that they all set up the same. So if you got a Jessel belt drive, there's a Jessel belt drive out there that uses a stock LS cam sensor. It sets up the same way. You do all the same stuff. It doesn't really, you don't necessarily need to have you know, this exact same thing. This is just showing you the setup procedure for it. So now, got a couple in there, right? And we're gonna take my little screwdriver. Where is it? Right here. All right. So if we look in there, you see it? Can you see it in the video? Right there, you see that shiny bolt? There's the shiny bolt. It's sticking to it, all right? So if you look, we're right at the edge of that thing. We're right at the falling edge of that thing. So that's right where we want to put that sensor, right? So now we grab our sensor. So the way these sensors work is there's a little LED light on them. So if it's wired correctly, when it's in front of the magnet, when it's seeing the magnet, the light will go off. When it's not seeing the magnet, the light will go on. So this is just, we don't have an engine ready to start or anything. So what we're gonna do is set this thing up. This is how I set them up before I fire them up, right? Is I run them until they touch, okay? Okay, so right there is where it bottomed out. Right there's, that's its bottomed out point, right? So it's rubbing up against that. Just like we needed a 40 to 50 thousandths gap here, right? If we thread this out, we gain more space. So with these sensors, the way these work, these are half 20 thread, right? Which means you have 20 threads per inch. So it's 1/20th of an inch. And if you go half of a thread, it's 1/40th of an inch. Or half of a rotation is 1/40th of an inch. So I'll run them in till they bottom out, and then I'll come off about 3/4, right? So 3/4 of a full rotation, and there we go. And then we'll lock that thing down. And that should give us right in the neighborhood of 40 thousandths. So we lock this thing down, and remember, bottomed out was here. There's bottomed out, right? So if we want a half, you take this, there's your light at the top here, right? Cord at the bottom, there's a half, there's about 3/4, right? And then we lock her down. And again, I use this aluminum wrench a lot because you can't break stuff with it. And I'm not exactly a small guy, so I'm known for breaking stuff. So now we can tighten these down, and we're good to go. So that's 195 before top dead center. And set up your crank trigger like this, and you got to program it in the software. We have plenty of videos on how to do that. And that's the falling edge, okay? So hopefully this answers some questions for everybody. The thing that happens when you don't have this set up correctly is that at high RPM, the cam and crank pulses have a tendency to land on top of each other. And when they land on top of each other, it's no good, right? So you get some sync errors, you get some backfires, you get a whole bunch of fun stuff that nobody really wants. So it's important to set these up properly. So take your time, do it right, and go racing. All right, see ya.